Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our session at AI at Work. How do we unleash the invisible workforce? I'm Vijay Vaidiswaran. I'm the US business editor for The Economist. I'm delighted to be here with four fascinating experts, thought leaders, provocateurs on the topic of artificial intelligence at work. We have with us Eva Kaili, Chair for Science and Technology and member of the European Parliament. Frank Salzgiver, Head of Innovation and Ventures Office at the European Space Agency, Gabe Dal Porto, CEO of Udacity, and Adrian Blair, CEO of Receipt Bank. We'll be hearing from them, and we'll delve deep into these issues, going beyond some of the usual platitudes about how either AI will solve everything or the dystopian prognostications that AI is going to take all our jobs and singularity will wipe out humanity. This is a session where we're going to keep it real. We're going to talk about what are the realistic ways in which we can foresee, and hopefully maybe even shift and change within our organizations the direction in which the application of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and related technologies can transform culture, can improve and enhance the lives of workers, of managers, can help us move from a backward-looking mindset, which is often the case in many companies, to perhaps a predictive and forward-looking mindset, and unleash human potential. Work as a collaborator and enabler of humans, rather than simply as something that is seen as an enemy of or a replacement technology for humans. With that spirit in mind, maybe I'll turn first to you, Eva. Can you give us your sense from your vantage point? What do you think are the most important ways that we can apply AI in the workplace to gain competitive advantage?
Thank you for having me on the very interesting topic. So basically, I think the most important is to define when we talk about AI what we mean, because we still don't have a common definition. And let me say that I see huge potential when we talk about automation. But then when you move a bit further to super intelligence, when machines can actually overcome the capacity of like a human mind, this means you can also give it the option and the opportunity to make a decision. So this means autonomy. And I think this is where the challenges start. Of course, we all understand that the potential is incredible to use AI systems. During the pandemic, everybody was expecting that it could actually lead us to a vaccine, to the treatment much faster, because when you put a lot of like data in an algorithm, you can understand the pattern of the disease, and then you can, of course, find easily and faster the treatment. I would say that in healthcare, we expect a big revolution. We expect also autonomous vehicles to become like a reality in a few years. And I think so mobility, transportation, healthcare, and of course, basically everything like education, teleworking, in the manufacturing sector, anything that could be automated. We heard that there are some estimation of like basically maybe even half of the jobs can be automated. We talk about predictive systems and, as I said, autonomous systems. So I think we have to prepare for a future where all the sectors of our lives will be transformed with software and hardware using artificial intelligence. In the European Parliament a few days ago, we also started to address the challenges. We tried to prepare new laws, and I think this is exactly what we should be doing at this point. And you already know that our children might have a job that we cannot even imagine yet because they are changing so fast. A friend of mine was telling me his daughter wanted to be an influencer, a YouTuber. So this is a job you cannot prepare very well for. You have to be able to understand coding, how data work. You have to have digital skills. And of course, we understand that now what's more important is to have creativity, a problem-solving mentality, and of course, to have a more mission-driven approach so that you can keep this essence of a human-centric AI. This is at least how we see things in EU. And as you very well said, we don't want AI that will replace everything. We want AI that will complement what people need, more dangerous tasks or repetitive
Right.
works, and leave more space for us to be creative and have better quality of life and work.
So that's a beautiful overview of your thinking and how you're looking at things about the potential for AI. And you made a couple of points I wanted to emphasize and pick up on a little bit. One, you pointed out that the definition of AI varies. In fact, people in the industry complain that as soon as something that seemed impossible and was called AI becomes possible and commonplace, we don't call it AI anymore. And so, in other words, the frontier keeps moving because of innovation, because of the advance of science. And so things that might have been now we call simply ordinary software or data analytics was considered very hard to do 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. So, which is good, which is a positive nature of innovation. But that means that the challenge continues to be further ahead. How do we incorporate AI into our work processes in a way, for example, that doesn't deprive us of privacy or reinforce societal biases? That's one of the challenges with machine vision, for example. And so, in your particular work, since you do have the privilege of representing constituents, what do you think of as the particular role for regulation, supervision, and how to do it in a way such that it doesn't retard innovation? What's your how are you approaching that question as the chair for the science and technology in this area?
Well, thank you. It's also very interesting because we have been trying to solve this matrix, how we can translate human rights and the principles we have offline into the online world, into digital rights, without stifling innovation. And it's not very easy, but a few days ago, again, we voted for the right to disconnect, which means under the prism of the pandemic, everybody's teleworking, and this means sometimes you go beyond your working hours, you're constantly connected, or you need to be constantly connected, and this needs to be addressed. So we need to discuss about a new social contract that would adapt to the needs of teleworking, teleeducation, and I would say the new digital era. So this is like one of the things that we have already addressed. We're calling for a European law. The same time, I would say that we need to translate all our principles into the digital era, the right to appeal. So once you have AI or an algorithm making decisions or excluding you from something, to have the right to redress. I would also take it a bit further. I would say the right to switch off, which means you always have to make sure that people, citizens, will have options and alternatives to work or to communicate or to make transactions. So I think these are the issues we have to address. So during the 2021 legislative period for us, we will have to work on files like the Digital Services Act and Markets Act, and also data governance, which means we need also to make sure that we will have good quality of data in order for the systems to work. And then we have to make sure that there will be a protection of our privacy and the rights we respect in democracies. And this can only happen if we can have safeguards for the whole life cycle of an AI system. So it's not easy because of course you'll understand that there is a resistance. Internet has been not regulated for several years now. So our task is not easy, but we also need to create competition. We need to make sure that there will be a vivid ecosystem out there, and that in the end we will manage to benefit people and society, especially in the European
Well,
Parliament and the Commission.
why
We
don't we
have
stop there,
also the
Eva?
Green Deal that, yeah, of course I
There's
can stop, but
there's
I would just
your
wanted to say
agenda is
sustainable. Yeah,
it's
it's big.
breathtaking. It's breathtaking
Sorry.
hearing you talk about your ambitions. We have someone joining us from California. They may have a slightly different point of view about the role of regulation and technology out in Silicon Valley and the American West. We'll hear from them in a moment. But you certainly set the table in quite an ambitious way. giving us a sense of how this is really a new era, a transformative era that's going to require a lot of thought. Whatever the decisions made on how to regulate, not regulating at all or not thinking about it certainly is not an option and requires a new kind of insight. Let me turn to Frank. Frank, you work at the not only the European Space Agency, but specifically at the cutting edge with ventures, and are involved with one of the most extensive space entrepreneurial networks and so on. So you're right there at the cutting edge, in a sense, where a lot of the high tech software applications are being put to a very dynamic use and in an entrepreneurial fashion. Can you give us your perspective when you look at the potential for transforming our work and some of the tension we have between finding the right rules of the road and unleashing that innovation?
Sure, thank you very much. And space is the backbone of our digital economy. And it's not about the future and tomorrow, it's about today and yesterday. When we look into our Copernicus satellites, which are producing 17 terabytes of data, so we would not even know how the climate change is going on and what we do with the Green Deal and to measurement if we would not have all these data. And we support about 230 startups and another 150 business case every year using these capabilities. And when we look into Earth observation and these kind of data, and this is already used, and I just was yesterday in a telecom conference with really leading companies in Europe in terms of pipelines, electrical wires, grids. There was Hapag-Lloyd. So it's about transportation, what we can do. And one of the questions is, okay, how they become more effective, how they can change the carbon footprint. And this part of that is, of course, being more effective. And when we look into agriculture, they're using all this data already today and have a very good overview per really square meters. And these are the applications what we do. And when we speak about predictive maintenance, that's current. We speak about predictive production. And it starts with the easy AI when we speak about the weather.
Can you define that? What do you mean, Frank? Yeah, predictive production. I mean, give us a definition.
There's I don't say any brand names, but there is a very big glass manufacturing in the UK. So when you make floating glass, it is about 2-3 days process. So what we still do, we have an energy efficient, or not energy efficient, but an energy intensive industry. We produce something and I would say, making rubbish better. So it would be much better to know that maybe this part of the production line is not very good and change it right away until it's through all the supply chain until the end where we have the quality control. And this is when you have a new street for painting the cars, it takes about 3 quarters to 1 year until you really have the quality. Would be fantastic to have that maybe in a couple of weeks. So getting the data already in the production layers and feed it back to the beginning and change the system. And this is predictive maintenance. And this will save resources, this will save energy, this will save on all, make the product better and more sustainable. This is something which, for example, we took out of extraterrestrial analyze software we developed in space, and we brought it from Max Planck back to the car manufacturers.
So from predictive maintenance to predictive production, I know the supply chain guys are excited about using predictive analytics in how they decide what to make as well. So we're seeing various forms of technology, software technology being applied from backward-looking processes to transform them into real-time and ultimately really forward-looking approaches that can spare resources, that can give us what we want. I'm hearing a lot of the rapid learning loops as well that we see in innovation, learning much more quickly in an adaptive fashion. So this could make organizations both more resilient and perhaps even more, dare I say it, agile, the buzzword of the last 10 years in Harvard Business Review. But if there's one thing the pandemic has taught us is that organizations need to become much more nimble. Let's shift gears. We've talked a little bit at the 30,000 foot level down to the 10,000 foot level, maybe appropriate given that we have a spaceman on the panel. But let me shift to Gabe. Gabe, your firm, Udacity, is at the forefront in the skilling and reskilling and upskilling enterprises. That's really getting down from the stratosphere down really to where people work, where people's futures can often be decided. Can you give us your perspective on what you see are the challenges arising from what is clearly one of the waves of technological revolution? It's not the first, won't be the last, but we're clearly living through a powerful wave of invention and innovation at the moment that's transforming the workplace. What are the challenges that you're hoping to deal with what you're applying at Udacity?
Thank you. It's a really important question. McKinsey predicts 800 million people will lose their jobs over the next 10 years due to AI, machine learning, and technology automation. That's roughly 1 in 4 people, 1 in 4 workers on the planet. And ironically, at the same time that enterprises are laying people off, they literally can't hire enough people with digital transformation type skills. 82% of the Global 2000 say they have a significant skills gap, and 70% of the Global 2000 say it's preventing innovation. And the World Economic Forum predicts over 100 million new tech jobs will be created in the next couple of years. So you have this really weird situation where enterprises are hiring or laying off as fast as they can, and they cannot hire fast enough in other jobs. And really what we try to do is to bridge that gap. Now, if you want to reskill, a workforce, it's not going to happen by hope and prayer. If we sit back and do nothing, then we will fail, and we'll have a lot of people out of work and a lot of open jobs. It's going to require a combination of public and private investment, and frankly, a major shift to skills-based hiring over degree-based hiring. If you try to reskill 800 million people on the university system, you would not just break the university system because it's not set up to scale. You would probably bankrupt the world, because in the United States, it's about $100,000 per 4-year degree. There's not enough dollars to do that. And most people would graduate with, journalism degrees or something that, no offense to journalism degrees, there's just not that many jobs out there. And so the university system isn't really set up to deal with this. And what we need is governments to step up and invest in tech training through reskilling efforts, not university efforts. Udacity works with Egypt, and Egypt came to us and said they wanted to create the number 5 tech outsourcing economy on the planet from a standing start. And so over the last couple of years and going forward, we're training 100,000 people in tech-forward jobs, and we've seen 70% positive career outcomes from that, right? So it's possible at a societal level. At an enterprise level, enterprises literally say they cannot hire enough people to fill those roles. They also say the number one risk to organizational change is lack of talent. And 52% of enterprises, Global 2000 companies, say upskilling and reskilling is their top priority. And the reason is it's 90% cheaper than going out and trying to hire people that just frankly don't even exist yet. And so
Dave, let me stop you for a second, because you've made such a compelling case. It seems so intuitively obvious that what you're saying is right. It begs the question, why aren't more countries doing this? You pointed to one kind of obstacle, that is the mental model of a 4-year college degree, particularly in Western societies, as sort of the minimum. And the studies have shown this recently, how many jobs, there's been an inflation in the credential required to do jobs that 20, 30 years ago didn't require a 4-year degree. Now it's just put in almost as a lazy way for filtering. When people who did those jobs without the degree are often doing the job better, recent studies have shown. That's one sort of obstacle to what you're talking about. But tell us a couple of more obstacles that we need to overcome in order to embrace the kind of reskilling, upskilling model that you're talking about. What works?
Yeah, I mean, what really works is to think about starting with an employable job resume. So if you want to be a data analyst, a full stack engineer, like what should you have actually done and developed experience? And instead of saying, well, you need to go to school for 4 years to actually get that job, you say, well, no, I just need to be able to do the job. And if you work backwards from there, that might just be about 4 months of training. And instead of $100,000, maybe it's $1,000 or $1,500. So I think just the availability of scalable training programs, cost-effective training programs delivered digitally, and focusing on real job skills, I think is a critical piece of this. The other piece that can't be discounted is funding, right? So the United States spends $60 billion a year on university education, as an example. And if you repurpose 5 billion of that on upskilling, reskilling at a significant level, you could train literally 3 to 5 million people on tech skills per year, get vastly higher return on investment, and get people out of poverty and out of unemployment, and learning how to fish and to feed themselves.
Great. That's a good agenda that you laid forth. Let me turn to Adrian. Adrian, we heard from Gabe about the little guy, as it were, one who's often left behind in the traditional elite educational systems. You have a deep interest in small business, the companies that might sometimes get behind. Can you talk a little bit about how some of these new technologies related to the bundle of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and related kinds of analytics, how these will or could help small business so that there's a level playing field, or at least so that they don't get left behind by the so-called superstar firms who are so well resourced in talent, in capital budgets, that they appear to be going from strength to strength. Even in this pandemic, we saw the biggest technology companies in the world, in essence, leapfrog ahead in terms of market valuations, the ability to invest and grow and win in the pandemic rather than lose. What's your formula to level the playing field, or at least to give the smaller companies a fighting chance?
I'll give you a very concrete example. So, as you say, I've worked in very big companies, and I've worked closely with a lot of very small companies. And one thing you almost take for granted if you're working in a big company is you've got a finance team, you've got a CFO, maybe you've got FP&A people, you've got people looking at numbers who've got those professional skills, who are telling you what's going on in the company financially and what you should be doing about it. If you're a small restaurant owner or a small shopkeeper, or you're a florist, you obviously don't have any of that. You just have, your skills as a florist or a cook or whatever it might be, but you don't have those finance skills. And what we see historically is, by far the number one reason for small businesses going bust is just poor cash flow management. They didn't necessarily have to go bust, but they just weren't managing their money well enough. So thanks to artificial intelligence, what we're now seeing, thanks to companies like Receipt Bank, is accountants are using technology to do a whole lot more for their small business clients. So for the price of the small business owner can pay to an accountant, suddenly instead of just getting a tax return, they're able to get actual business advisory services of the kind that a big company might enjoy from their finance team. And basically, the way that's happening is that compliance services, basic bookkeeping, doing bank reconciliations, all this kind of stuff, used to take a huge amount of time for the accounting profession. It used to be something that was expensive to perform. It would take many hours of staff work. Now, thanks to technology, that can be done far, far more quickly, like orders of magnitude more quickly than it could in the past. So suddenly you've got all this time that you in the past would have had to spend looking backwards at the tax returns and stuff. You've got that time to actually look at what's going on right now in your clients' businesses and add a whole lot more value as a result.
No, all of you have laid out the opportunity narrative extremely well. I want us to talk a little bit about the inevitable harm or displacement effect of robotic process automation or other forms of technologies that have been advocated on this session today. Because again, some of the studies that have been referred to do talk about that there will be job losses. As with every wave of technological innovation, going back to the cotton gin and so on, the difference this time is that the pace of change appears to be faster. The ability of people to get skilled or to distribute new kinds of credit or new kinds of opportunities may be more difficult this time. If you take the very long view, if you come back in 100 years, sure, things will probably be better off, broadly speaking, for society. But right now, for the accountant that lost his or her job, or for the back office paralegal, unless society finds some ways to provide some alternatives, like skilling, like some form of credit for retraining through public policy. And we may find this is an unpleasant period of time we're going to go through. So I want to get to that question of what do we do. But before we do, I think, Frank, you wanted to leap in on this comment. Can you follow up?
Yeah, well, very short. I think you were totally right. The smaller startup companies or the SMEs were reacting much quicker in the crisis. And with the tools which is available, including AI, they're even reacting more quicker than usual. And I think that is really advantage. And I have to disagree, but I think any investment in education is the best thing you can do. You need the hundreds, thousands of engineers and smart people, because when we look into our companies, they're coming all from amazing schools. Maybe they have not finished it all, but I think education and just not on job training will solve it, because we don't need a solution for the next 3 quarters. We need a solution for the next decades.
So thank you for that. Clearly, we need both the kind of upskilling education that's being talked about, as well as the continuance of PhDs and cutting edge advancement of science. More of both probably is the answer if we can find the resources. But what about the question about how to compensate the losers, or at least to give them a leg up or a chance, a level playing field? Bill Gates, of all people, obviously a very pro-innovation kind of guy, has suggested that he's so worried about the displacement effect that there should be a robot tax. And a very controversial idea. Economists generally don't like that kind of a proposal, but it does get at a concern, a societal concern about either unfair advantages gained by those who are able to invest and automate and grow more efficient, or the displacement effect of technology on humans, on workers. Now, I know, Eva, one of the things among your many talents, you are also a tax expert, I understand. Can you give us your thought on robot tax in Europe? How would you feel about that?
Well, actually, we worked a bit on this issue. It has been an interesting discussion a couple of years ago. We are still talking about it. So we try to, I think if we skip the word tax and we say we need to reward citizens for participating, or we need to establish an adjustment fund for what's happening with artificial intelligence and help them reskill, because at this point we have a mismatch of skills. So we definitely have the demand for new jobs, for software engineers, for computer scientists, for people that can work and understand digital skills. So we have, actually we don't have enough supply. So we have to fix that. And for AI tax, we discussed about that. We need to make sure that you will be taxed where the profit is made, which online becomes quite challenging. And this would mean actually that we will manage to reduce the inequalities that these exponential technologies have the tendency to increase. Recently I was participating at a very ambitious SPAC for EdTech, a blue chip SPAC, and I saw amazing opportunities in the EdTech sector. So I was realizing there are awesome tools there, and using AI, people and professionals, working professionals, can actually reskill, and the location is now irrelevant. So this is like one of the challenges we have to face. So where should you be taxed? Where should the company be located? How can we address what is now happening and how this is changing? We have some ideas, of course, and we will try to have a new competition tool in Europe. I know when I talk about regulation, everybody in the innovation, they feel a bit resistant, but I do believe we need to have some rules and legal certainty to be able to also protect our democracies. And you talked about, Frank, basically about becoming resilient. We have to transform the old traditional models into more innovative models, because these are the businesses and the SMEs that survived the pandemic, the ones that they could adapt and they could transfer everything online. So I think we need to change, let's say, rethink economy, and try to make sure that we will take the best out of AI with the exciting opportunities we have. And when you talked also, Frank, about the predictive maintenance, it has to do with water, it has to do with the Green Deal that we are talking about. You can save money, you can, and Adrian, he's working in the banking sector. I worked a lot with blockchain. We could use blockchain for cross-border transactions now that are more safe, more fast. We can basically reduce the hidden fees. And this would save a lot of money to reinvest it and make sure that these inequalities will be addressed. And of course, as you all know, we in Europe, GDPR showed the way of how we can also protect people from what is changing and that they will not be excluded by the rankings that AI could bring, or by having an access to a loan or their pension. So we have to make sure that we will keep things for exponential technologies under some kind of control where we will have a better quality of life, and we will not completely try to try to catch up with what's happening. And as I said before, with super intelligence, where when you're going to give autonomy to systems to make decisions.
So, Gabe, you have a thought on the question of taxation and how it affects the question of social equity.
Yeah, and the question of social equity, I think, is super important here. Taxation allows us to shift money around and maybe distribute that to people who've been affected. But that's not the long-term solution. If you have a class of people making a lot of money and a class of people making not much at all, there's a fundamental problem there. And I've seen that firsthand growing up in rural United States, where industry automated and people that used to have good, high-paying middle-class jobs lost their jobs. Today, the downtowns are boarded up. These people are making minimum wage if they have jobs at all. So the long-term answer has to be, what do you do about those people? How do you get them new jobs, new skills, more money, so that they can be part of the economy of the future? Part of this can be government. Part of this can be corporate social responsibility efforts, as enterprises either lay people off or kind of lean into their social responsibility. How can they invest in upskilling people so they can get on with their lives? It's never going to work if we just trust people to take a government handout and hope for the best. That's not a good quality of life. What upsets me about the place I grew up is that the population density of geniuses is the same as it is in Silicon Valley, and the economic disparity could not be greater. And so we need to tap into these extraordinary people and empower them to do extraordinary things and reduce that inequality gap.
You make a powerful point. I know, I think it was West Virginia where you grew up, which is a textbook case of how automation has led to a left behind place, to use the modern term of art. And there's a role for policy, there's a role for education, there's a role for migration as well. Historically, that's what happened. Places got left behind, people moved to find opportunity. I wonder if with the advent of digital technology and the transformative kind of connectivity that we're living through, whether there's a new opportunity that's emerging, that rather than simply leave places behind, if we were to spread access to high-speed broadband connectivity, 5G, and some of the things that are made possible that we've been talking about all week here at our Economist event, that you might actually be able to see places that would otherwise have been left behind be able to be connected to the world, that we become a world of 8 billion potential innovators in waiting who have access to the tools needed to connect to markets, to connect to ideas, to connect to opportunities. I think that's what's really exciting about the moment in which we're living. The way, for example, that we saw mobile telephony transform the fortunes of the bottom billion and the bottom few billion who previously were so far out of the global economy. We still have many more to go. Half the world still doesn't have reliable access to the internet, but we know that the cheap cell phone has really been one of the most powerful democratizing tools in innovation. Now, Eva, you called out fintech as a potential tool for financial inclusion. Adrian, you wanted to make a comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you make a great point, Vijay, about, if we really want to help the disadvantaged, the answer is not to restrict technology or regulate it. The answer is to unleash it. And I'm a big believer that technology and AI used correctly is making our products and services better. It's making economies grow faster, and it's actually creating jobs, not destroying jobs. If you look at unemployment in the last decade until COVID in most advanced countries, we're in a much better place than we were before all the technological advances of the last 10 years or so. So I'm a big believer in the power of technology to do good. And what we see in fintech is it's opening up opportunities for people to access capital, because credit scoring can be done far more effectively than it could be in the past. So people who weren't previously able to borrow now can. It's helping financial professionals to do so much more for their clients. I gave the example of bookkeepers who use receipt banks technology, top of the list of jobs that people thought were going to be destroyed, actually able to do so much more thanks to technology like artificial intelligence. So I'm a big optimist that the more we can invest in technology, make it available to as many people as possible, the more innovation and jobs and growth the world will see.
The former chairman of the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank, Paul Volcker, liked to say that the last truly disruptive technology in finance he saw was the ATM machine or the cash point. And of course, his skepticism aside, long-term studies have shown that people thought those cash points or ATMs would put bank tellers out of business. In fact, what we saw was proliferation of cash points and a growth in the number of tellers as banks were able to redeploy talent to other services, to expand branches, put humans to better value use. And I think in a way we can try to find those opportunities in workplaces where technology can release humans from tedious tasks, or in factories, dangerous tasks, or ones that might put them through repetitive stress injury and other sorts of stress.
I'm a big fan of Steve Jobs' phrase that the computer was a bicycle for the mind. It's helping your brain to do so much more than it otherwise could. And I think it's a great optimistic way to look at it.
And I think another one of the markers on this, the annual get-together in Las Vegas, the CES, so the Consumer Electronics Show, is usually a time for glitz and gadgets and new paradigms to be unveiled by Silicon Valley heroes. This year, the opening keynote was the woman who runs General Motors, Mary Barra. And her big announcement was actually about an automated set of technologies, ultimately to be empowered by artificial intelligence for warehouses and logistics, including smart pallets and so on. In fact, the opposite of a smartphone, not very glitzy, it seems, but in fact, the idea is that the embedded artificial intelligence and automation inside would unleash humans, and the potential for us to work on less dangerous, less tedious tasks was the deeper insight. And so with that in mind, let me ask you in just our final couple of minutes together, what would you predict is the most powerful way that the way we work will be changed going forward? We've had a good round robin sort of looking at the future, broadly speaking, optimistically, but with some questions about regulation and guardrails and the need to keep things on the right path. But if you were to make a bet on the one powerful way, let me give you 10 years, a 10-year prediction, how work will be transformed for our audience that's listening keenly. What would you say? And I'll ask each of you in turn to give a short answer. Let me start with you, Eva.
Well, that's a tough one in 10 years. So I would see a completely different world. I think every sector will be transformed, and I mentioned the ones that will be affected the most. I think if we get it right, and we have a good chance to get it right at this point, we can actually see people collaborating and empowering communities cross-border, and this would create like new jobs and opportunities worldwide. So we don't need to relocate to enter these new business models. We can work from home, and we can improve our climate. We can make sure that our economy creates more jobs and more value, but also we have more free time to spend with good quality. I would definitely see that we would have the challenge for privacy, and I wouldn't compromise that for safety. So I would see hybrid different challenges that we need to address. But I think we will see autonomous vehicles for sure. We will see biotech, a biotech revolution. I think this is going to be the next thing we're going to be discussing a lot after AI. And we're going to see robots with IoT working and taking over tasks that we wouldn't like to do, or like tasks that would be unsafe for workers. So I'm quite optimistic that we will manage to do that. I think the platform economy will remain very strong. This means that we will have to also understand that globalization will create new challenges online. And the same time, I believe that the wave of DeFi, the decentralized finance, will also will also grow a bit more, and it will be more accepted. In 10 years, I think we're going to have more possibilities there to cross-border work
I'm going to
and
stop
collaborate.
you there. In 10 years, we're going to have more possibilities. You've given us 75 answers to the question, but you fill me with
That's
optimism
true.
about
You know
the future.
what? It's not
But
a
I have.
very easy question.
I know, I put you on the spot. But in fact, I'm actually feeling for our other speakers because they have nothing left to say, presumably. But I'm going to continue on. Frank, one way that you think will most dramatically change in the next 10 years?
Real connectivity, not what we have now. When we speak about 5G, 5G is small. Space will connect the last billions via space. And like Steve Hawkins said, remember to look up to the stars, not down to our feet.
Excellent. Gabe?
I think remote work is not just here to stay, but will transform society. The ability to hire talent from anywhere on the globe is going to unleash all that extra talent that has been in the Rust Belt and Appalachia and other underrepresented, underprivileged parts of the world. And I think we'll see a real normalizing of opportunity across geographies.
Terrific. Adrian, you get the last word.
I think it's diversity in like huge letters. Like the types of roles in organizations will be dramatically more diverse, I think, in 10 years' time than they are today. You won't have the marketing department and the finance department. You'll have 20, 30 different types of roles in companies. People are getting, I think, more and more finding more and more ways to use their diverse talents in the workplace.
Fantastic. So it's impossible to summarize such a sweeping vision of the future, but I would say that the four of you have given us a panorama of how artificial intelligence is going to transform our workplace and indeed our companies, our business models, even our lives. I leave here encouraged not just about artificial intelligence, but about human intelligence. Thank you all for sharing it with us, and thanks to the audience for joining us today.